get through this.
Easy for listening. I was able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome at Shadowboxing. Today my guest is s02e02. Sue is a leader of the opposition in our upper house in the state government and shadow minister for so many things. Can you tell us how
That's
many?
right. So leader of the opposition in the Legislative Council, and my portfolios include child protection, disabilities, community services, women and early childhood.
Tell me, what is your plan for the election, and if your party wins, what do you want to do?
Our plan as WA Labor is to focus on the things that people have been saying to them are their priorities. And what they're saying to us, for example in metropolitan Perth, is that they think this Barnett government has been focused too much on sort of inner CBD, big infrastructure projects at the cost of looking after people in the suburbs and towns where they live and work. We know that congestion and public transport are major issues for West Australians, and we're going to be campaigning hard on MetroNet, which is our solution to provide connected train transport throughout metropolitan Perth. Perth is a growing city. We need, and people are saying they want, serious public transport to address serious congestion. Labor has the history and the record on providing trains and public transport. I think people have confidence based on what we've done before that we are the party that can deliver on public transport. It's one of the key issues that people are talking about, that and of course the cost of living. People are really struggling with their electricity bills, for example, which have gone up 62% over the last 4 years. So we'll be campaigning hard on getting our priorities right and listening to what people have got to say. And then once we're in, assuming that we win the election, which is a big ask, but assuming that we win the election, there are some important areas within my electorate of South Metropolitan Region.
Such as?
There are 4 key marginal seats in the South Metropolitan area. So these are lower house seats that form part of my region. Southern River, Jandakot, Fremantle, which will be an interesting one to watch because of the recent history.
So many contenders as well.
That's right. And of course Riverton. There are 4 key seats. There are lots of issues, but I've got to say congestion is one of the highest ones.
So transport. But we got the buses, we got the trains. So what else we need? So is it enough to just have more train service, or more often the trains going and transporting people, and the buses, just more number of buses, or anything else is needed?
Sure. What people tell us, and you can see it yourself, you go to any of the train stations in my area in the southern suburbs, is that trains are packed. There's not enough parking at the train stations. But what people are really liking about MetroNet is that it's interconnected. Part of it will include, for example, a line to the airport, but it's about much better connections.
So why train is better connection than bus?
People,
in the existing system.
Trains are not on roads, so it reduces the amount of congestion on the roads.
But you need lots of money to rail the trains. So you have to dig up, you have to, you need more space, the whole exercise is much more expensive.
It's a big exercise, there's no doubt about. People have seen us deliver. They saw us deliver the Mandurah train line, for example, and I think they generally have confidence that we know how to deliver that sort of project. It's a big project, there's no question about that, but Perth is becoming a very big city and people want better connections, and that's what MetroNet is all about.
So the train is the solution in your books?
Train is a major part of the solution. Yes, of course, we'll need additional bus connections as well, and we need to do a lot better on looking after our roads as well. But there's no question that better train connections is better for the environment, it's better for reducing congestion on roads, and it's easier for people to use.
Now you mentioned just before, the parking at the train stations, but the Liberals just announced and they're planning to build these 2 stories parking spaces for the train stations all around south and north. What do you think about that?
Well, we don't actually know if they have committed to that. What we've got is 2 candidates who are promising their local electors that it's something they want to work on. It's interesting as to whether the Liberal Party itself actually endorses that as a promise. And we call on the Premier, come out and explain to the electors, this is a promise, show us how you're going to fund it, and come clean on it, because we don't want to be in the same position we were last time, where the candidate, for example, in the local area promised a train line to Ellenbrook,
Yes.
and then the Premier said, well, that was
never
just
happened.
a candidate.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a promise from me. So in respect to the multi-storey car parks, we've got two candidates for the Liberal Party saying that's what they're going to do. We haven't seen the Premier actually back them up yet. MetroNet is all about better connections, so you're not going to have so many people trying to park in one particular train station if you've got more train stations throughout the network, and if you've got better connections without the network. So right now you've got a smaller amount of stations and lots of people trying to cram in and park at those stations. A bigger network, a better connected network, sees less demand on individual stations.
The only criticism I heard about from the people on the Labour Party's playing with these better train connections, takes too much time, we need a solution now, and we got an infrastructure, why don't we just virtualising that?
Part of the problem that we face right now is that when we were in government, we were ready to order additional carriages for the current train system. The Barnett government came into power and stopped that order, so we will inherit a system that is already behind the eight ball in terms of how we immediately respond to issues. We know that better connections across the network will help people in the short to medium term as well to make those connections. And we'll be making our specific commitments about how MetroNet will roll out and when it will roll out closer to the election.
Let's see, you Shadow Minister for Disabilities. What made you take this position, or what's your sort of connection with disability?
Sure. I've lived the life. My mum had a serious car accident about 18 years ago now, and she suffered an acquired brain injury as a result of that, and has been left with permanent disability as a result of that. So for my father, for my mother, whose life changed dramatically, and for the rest of our family, it meant we had to deal with all of the bureaucracy, all of the services about trying to put in place the right arrangements so mum could live at home for as long as she possibly could. I have a personal connection, therefore, with disability. I know what it's like for families grappling with trying to get the right services for someone in their family with a disability. I'm absolutely, passionately committed to making Western Australia the best place to live for someone with a disability, and ensuring that all those with a disability can aspire to live the fullest life that they are able to and that they want to. An important part of that is ensuring that we get serious about the negotiations with the Commonwealth on a national disability insurance scheme. That's absolutely essential, and unfortunately for people in Western Australia with a disability, Premier Barnett started the conversation around an NDIS by claiming it was some crazy idea thought up by bureaucrats in Canberra. In fact, an NDIS is something that people with a disability themselves and their families have been lobbying for about 20 years. I'm really pleased that the federal government is moving forward on that policy area, and I wish that Western Australia had one of the trial sites, one of the pilot sites, but because of the kind of Canberra bashing, I guess, that characterised Premier Barnett's initial negotiations around the NDIS, we missed out on that. But it's an area that I think we need to do much better on. People with a disability, wherever they live in this country, ought be entitled to a decent level of service. It shouldn't be the kind of rationing and raffle that people in Western Australia have to enter into now to get money to pay for the services they need to live a dignified life.
So who is missing out?
About 80 to 90% of West Australians in any funding round, and there are 3 of them a year, miss out on the money that they need.
You mean 80 or 90% of the disability WA people missing out?
They miss out, 80 to 90%.
It's a huge number.
It is a massive number. So that is getting in place an NDIS, which is a universal system, an entitlement system, not one where you have to enter some kind of lottery. That's absolutely critical. So that's number one. Number 2 is we need, I think, far better options for housing for people with disability. We tend to I think quite small when it comes to
Yes.
what are the best options for people with disabilities. I think we can do much better in that area. But the number one issue is putting in place a national disability insurance scheme that is an entitlement scheme that is properly funded, and that we make sure that people in Western Australia are better off under it than they are now. If we can get all of those things right, then our capacity to deal with a whole range of other issues is much better.
So there's need to be the basic rights of disabled people to get the help and the assistance, which is not currently exist.
That's right.
In WA at least. Thanks, E. And don't go away, please, because we're coming back after the short break and more talk on shadowboxing.